Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Andrew.
Later than usual. I'm good.
Later than usual.
Yeah, that's because you were out carousing.
I had a late night. On a Sunday, of all things.
Yeah, school night.
School night. I was at the BAFTAs, the TV BAFTAs last night. Horrible Histories, which I'm in, was nominated for an award, which we didn't win. Otherwise, it would be a goodly morning, of course.
Would be. I would have gone there had you won, but obviously,
thanks,
you know, the voters who
we couldn't
the
find
judges
grounds
got it
to
wrong.
go there on either count. But yeah, it was fun. But man, it's a long day and quite a long night as well.
Any juicy gossip?
Juicy gossip. A man, I think called Tom, came up to me and said he's listening to the show.
Great. Hi, Tom.
Yeah. I think he was nominated for a current affairs programme. And beyond that, I was very excited because I met a guy called Patrick Bramall from Colin from Accounts.
Oh, I fucking love that show.
So do I.
I
And
love it.
I had the surreal experience of being at this party and getting a text from someone saying, "Where are you? Patrick Bramall from Colin from Accounts wants to meet you."
Amazing.
So I then went and said hello. He follows me on Instagram.
Okay. So he's a fan of your other work. I don't
think he's an Arsenal fan.
I was
He didn't
hoping
mention
for a
it if he
second.
was.
I was hoping for a second he might be, one of our many Aussie gooners. It's a great show, that, by the way. If anyone hasn't seen it, Colin from Accounts, it's really funny.
It's really good.
I highly recommend it.
He
Yeah.
writes it with his wife, and they co-star together, Harriet Dyer.
With Colin, of course.
Of course,
who's the main star. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, those two are great, but Colin steals the show.
I'm trying to think if there was any other hot goss. Oh, well, Chloe Kelly and Alicia Russo presented an award.
Blimey.
So there was a bit of an Arsenal vibe there.
Very good.
Beyond that, no major goss to report.
Okay.
But yeah, a good evening was had. And then obviously, I mean, I would imagine I was the only person sat in the literal ceremony of the BAFTAs live streaming a Premier League game. As I waited for them to announce our award, I was like, can I get away with this? There is Wi-Fi. So I saw a fair bit of the game like that, and then have since caught up. I mean, to be fair, at half-time, I basically stopped checking in. I thought, I don't need to know after that point. So I was delighted when I discovered that we had recovered to draw 2-2.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, there was a lot of I can't wait for this season to be over kind of vibe around the halftime period.
Yeah, I jumped
yesterday.
in the Discord at halftime to sort of sample the mood, and it was not good.
No. I didn't sample that particular mood, but I could see it from, what was going on. And yeah, listen, I don't blame anyone at that point for thinking, fuck, this is not going to be good, because it wasn't good up to that point. It hadn't been good. And I think I said in the blog today, at halftime, I was fearing we were going to take one of those Anfield pastings that has happened in the past. And they're not a lot of fun, it's fair to say. But I was pleasantly surprised by what happened in that second half. And I kind of enjoyed it, because it did go against expectations and, based on what we'd seen in the first half, and based maybe on what you might think where would you put it? The sort of mindset of this Arsenal team, where they are in their heads after what has been a difficult week and going out to PSG. If the second half had been more of the same, I would have sort of understood that, if not necessarily been a big fan of it. So yeah, there's a bit to get into actually when it comes to analysing this game.
Yeah, it did sort of briefly feel like we'd gone back to 2014 or something, didn't it? In terms of that first half performance and maybe the manner of the goals that we conceded too, which no doubt we'll get into. But I think coming out of it with a point is really important. Actually, I think just for the mood, as you say, like it would have got pretty bleak. And I think it was really important that the players kind of asserted themselves and didn't allow Liverpool to sort of roll them over like that. I just think that's something that probably, not only would it have cast a shadow over the end of this season, I think it could have cast one over the summer too.
Yeah.
Led into that.
That's very true. I actually I was chatting to a Liverpool fan, Dean Van Wyn, who occasionally submits some questions for the podcast, and he was sort of saying he really wanted Liverpool to win yesterday. He's a Liverpool fan, obviously. He really wanted them to win yesterday to sort of leave that in our heads, going into next season, which, I completely get. And I think what's interesting about the way that we responded, the way we came back, is that this season, despite the fact Liverpool have been worthy champions, I don't think anyone would take away from the fact that they are the team that deserve to win it. They haven't beaten us. We all know that we've got to improve and we've got to do better next time around. But, that leaves something in their heads, I think, as well, going into next season. And, beyond that, Newcastle won yesterday, so we needed something from this game. We got a point. And I think as well, we needed to get something after what had happened against PSG. We really did. Yeah. It was so disappointing and so deflating that to get something, I think, is a bit restorative in a way, and maybe doing it the way we did it is a little bit extra because of the fact we were 2-0 down. And I don't think if you'd asked, 100 football fans what the score was going to be at the end, more than one or two would have said, well, 2-2, or Arsenal could get something from this game, or indeed Arsenal could even potentially have won the game right at the death with 10 men. No.
And I think given the exertions of this group, given the sort of psychological effects of going out against PSG, to produce a comeback in those circumstances was actually pretty impressive and went some way towards redeeming what they produced in the first half. I think there's kind of an internal logic for this game that sort of makes sense. Like, I can understand why Arsenal turned up and looked flat, and equally, they obviously got a rollicking off the manager at half time. They responded to it. And we kind of end up, I think, in a better place than we were at kickoff. But it was quite a roller coaster journey to get there.
It was a bit of I won't say ordeal, but we went through a bit. So let's start with, the fact there was no Declan Rice in the team. So that meant Mikel Merino was pushed back into midfield, and also Leandro Trossard played up front. And Arsenal started quite well. They had a really good chance to score in the opening couple of minutes. I think in the sort of, with everything else that's gone on around this game, there hasn't been much said about the free kick routine that led to that chance for Bukayo Saka, which is, when you look back on it, really, really smart. Arsenal do that thing where they stand the players offside and they come back into the line, which we see them do a lot. But the starting position of Bukayo Saka was he was well onside. By the time the ball was kicked, he was miles onside and got in behind. I think 100% fit, sharp Bukayo Saka scores that. Fuck me. Do you hear that?
What was that?
That was
That was a foghorn, was it not, Andrew?
That's Virgin Media. The guy said, just called to the door a while ago going, I need to get access to your property because we're putting in a new fiber optic fucking cable somewhere. So I've left the side gate open for him, but he mentioned nothing about drilling into my wall.
Wow.
Anyway,
yes, it was a nicely worked free kick. I agree. And a good chance. I mean, at Anfield, you don't get tons of opportunities like that. So it was a big moment. Saka couldn't control the finish. I think he would expect to do better there. It is. I'm not saying it's totally easy. The way it's sort of bouncing and it doesn't quite sit right for him on his left foot. I mean, maybe there's an argument he should be going with the other foot. I don't know. But But it comes off the bottom of his studs, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, he doesn't really make great contact. It's a couple now this week. Obviously, the one against PSG with his right foot, and then this one where I think, a properly 100% fully fit, fully sharp Bukayo Saka took those chances away, Sort of between that and the next chance that Arsenal had, Liverpool did have a very good chance. I think it was Luis Diaz who shot straight at David Raya. We were sort of opened up a bit. And in that first half, I think Mo Salah really was pulling the strings for Liverpool in a very significant way. And when he's on that kind of form, you're going to find it a little bit difficult. But there was another moment for Arsenal when Thomas Partey robbed the ball off, I can't remember who it was, in the Liverpool box, and it was there, it was there for somebody to take responsibility. I think they got in each other's way. Odegaard made a run outside. Partey kind of delayed because he thought Trossard was going to hit it. Trossard delayed because he thought Partey was going to hit it. And by the time it ended up with somebody hitting the ball, I think it was Trossard, it was sort of the chance gone then,
Mm. Yeah, and those are big moments in games. And again, it's a bit like against PSG. Are we being as efficient as possible in these situations? Obviously, that improved in the second half, but in the first half, we just didn't quite have that sharpness you'd want to see from us in the final third.
Then things, went wrong quite quickly. Very quickly. The two goals we conceded, one was, Liverpool they broke actually down the left-hand side and were in a dangerous position. Saliba got back to defend, cleared it for a throw-in. Liverpool took a very quick throw. We weren't reset. There was a lot of space. They got the cross in and Gakpo was there to head home at the near post. It was just a classic example of how, if you're not quick to reset yourself and the opposition take a quick throw in. Have you heard of such a thing, by the way? A quick throw in? What is this?
Can be done.
Can be done. There's the evidence. So a quick throw in, it caught us out. We were sleeping a bit, and I think it's a smart finish, by the way, at the near post from Gakpo, but obviously he's got no one anywhere near him, and it's a good cross in and 1-0 to Liverpool.
Yeah, I mean, Mikel Arteta was really unhappy, obviously, wasn't he, with the defending on these first two goals, and I totally understand why. I mean, it's a simple ball over the top, really. Arsenal just about deal with it. I did think Ben White looked quite laboured, sort of chasing back in that instance. And then I think switching off when the ball goes out of play is, when I say this game was sort of, the first half at least, reminiscent of some pretty poor performances we've had at Anfield previously. This is the kind of stuff you associate with Arsenal teams of another era, really. That sort of sloppiness. So it's relatively uncharacteristic for this group. And so, yeah. But we made it really easy for them.
We did, and the second goal was really easy for them as well. I think Szoboszlai runs off the back of Kivior. Doesn't quite react quickly enough. And similarly in the middle, William Saliba is caught on his heels. The ball comes across. It's a good pass from Mo Salah, but we're caught out a bit too easily there. Saliba on his heels, caught out, switched off, whatever you want to say. And Luis Diaz is there to make it 2-0. I think it was 2 goals in, 90 seconds, something like that. And, when that happens, it's hard not to fear the worst, isn't it? Because we've been there and done that and experienced those kinds of things before. It can become very, very demoralizing. And I think what's worse about goals like that, when you concede goals like that, they really make you feel bad about your team, If someone bangs one in from 35 yards, you're like, well, fuck, maybe we could have closed him down a bit. Maybe the goalkeeper could have done something. But, sometimes you got to respect the quality of the strike, et cetera, et cetera. But when you're pulled apart that easily, when players aren't focused, when they're not concentrating, it really does make you feel terrible about conceding above and beyond, how bad you normally feel, because you get the sense that, okay, if they've done that to us twice in 90 seconds, how many more times can they do that between now and the end of the game?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just fear the worst, don't you? And again, I spoke about sloppiness on the first goal, not reacting to the restart. I mean, you could argue this is another case of not reacting to a restart in terms of the game actually kicking off again and conceding again so quickly. I just think it shows that mentally in that first half, we weren't quite in the right place. We weren't quite in the right frame of mind. And I think if that's ever forgivable, it might be off the back of what happened in midweek and the elimination and the exhaustion and all those things. But if you do that at this level in a game of this size, magnitude, against an opponent of this quality, you're going to be really badly punished for it.
Yes. And I think if there was any wind in our sails at all in that first half, it was completely gone by those 2 goals, because what happened in the rest of that first half, I think even maybe more than the goals is what made Mikel Arteta angry. I think he's obviously angry at the way we conceded, because, you work on that stuff and it's basic stuff. But we were sapped of any confidence that we had. We didn't win our duels. The arse fell out of our performance, basically. We were second best in every aspect of that first half, right until the end of the first 45 minutes when the whistle blew. Raya had to make another very good save, didn't he? From Curtis Jones, and Liverpool basically dominated us right the way through until half time, at which point I think Mikel Arteta had some words to say in that dressing room.
Yeah, something about duels and being upset, I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I obviously we're not flies on the wall, but I don't think it requires. And he kind of stopped short of being explicit, really, about what he said at half time. But it doesn't need a great leap of the imagination, I don't think, to know that he really must have let them have it.
He gave them some vigorous words of encouragement.
Yes, and rightly so. I think. Well, I think he sort of probably felt a sort of. Obviously, there's his personal pride, there's his expectations as a manager, but I do think that he recognised that this could be a damaging day for Arsenal, and a damaging week, which is not what we needed, So I think he was right to kind of drag them over the coals a bit. Because what were your expectations at half time? I mean, were you in that sort of frame of mind of like
damage limitation? Really, genuinely,
really?
Yeah. Like I wasn't. It's funny. I watched the first half of Barcelona Real Madrid because it was on before our game, and Real Madrid went 2-0 up, and Barcelona were 4-2 up at half time.
Yeah,
and it was an illustration or a demonstration of how football can take you down one path and quickly take you down another path, right? I have that evidence in front of me, but I really didn't think we had it in us. I really didn't think we had it in us to pull this game back, to get ourselves back into it in the way that we did. Like, I know that we can play better. I absolutely know we can play better, but I just felt the 2 quick-fire goals, Liverpool's dominance in that first half, the fact that we looked mentally and physically fatigued after PSG, because I think there was a huge effort went into that PSG game, when we sort of put aside the disappointment of how we feel about it. I don't think you can argue that Arsenal didn't try or didn't do themselves justice or didn't put in the effort, So physically it was tiring. Mentally it must be really tiring. They're disappointed themselves. They're sad. They knew how close they came to a Champions League final and pushed really hard and couldn't quite get there. Nothing makes legs heavier than losing games. Nothing at all. So I was really worried that we wouldn't be able to do anything. I thought if we keep it at 2-0, it's sort of like, well, it is what it is, which is why I suppose, and we'll come to Mikel Arteta's post-game comments and reaction in a second, but I guess that's why I would be more forgiving of what I saw from Arsenal over the course of 90 minutes yesterday than he was, because he was having none of it. He was having none of that first half, and I get it, but when you turn a game around to get a point, and an important point, as we've said, when you really don't expect it, I guess it makes you feel better, unless you're Mikel Arteta.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it would have been a very different experience for us if the halves were flipped, I guess. I'm with you. Like, I'm actually quite sympathetic to the team in this position, given the last few months they've had and what's happened of late. But equally, it's Arteta's job, isn't it, to set the standards and to demand more. I'm sure he was pretty explicit with them about his thoughts at the interval, and it seemed to have a pretty swift impact. There was a tactical change as well, right? Is that the moment that he flipped Martinelli and Trossard?
Well, a little bit, but they kept highlighting that on Sky. But it was for me, it went a bit further than that, a bit deeper than that. It wasn't just Trossard and Martinelli flipping around. What I saw was quite a lot of positional rotation from Arsenal players. Odegaard coming a bit more over to the left-hand side at times. Lewis Skelly going over a bit more to the right at times. Marino drifting into positions that he wasn't taking up in the first half. The Martinelli-Trossard thing. Even Saka, to an extent, operating in slightly different areas of the pitch. So it wasn't just like, okay, we'll put our striker on the left and our left guy in the middle. And I think, I could be completely wrong here, but to me, obviously the fact we scored quite early was a big help. It was only a minute and a half into the second half and we get that goal, which we'll talk about in a second. But I think that goal, coupled with us doing something that I don't think Liverpool expected. I think Liverpool expected us to be maybe a bit more on it in the second half because, you've got to try and raise yourself and it's your job to go out and respond. But I think we slightly unsettled them with some of those positional rotations and they didn't quite figure it out, which is why I think he made a triple change fairly quickly, didn't he? Or within about 15 minutes, I think. Well, maybe more, just over 15 minutes, and he made a triple change. But at that point, Arsenal had been well and truly in the game in the second half. They got that goal. Nice goal, by the way. I think Martinelli's movement in there is quite interesting. He sort of creeps away from Virgil van Dijk, who probably should look over his shoulder or whatever it is. But Martinelli's movement is good. And I think one of the things that we haven't seen a great deal from Gabriel Martinelli, and I maybe want to discuss him in part two because there's some questions. We saw, when he first broke through, he's a very good header of the ball. He's good in the air, put him in those positions in the box and he can finish with his head pretty well. So I thought it was a nice goal, nice cross, nice movement, good header, flicked it in the far post. And I think that kind of woke us up and those tactical changes unsettled Liverpool. They didn't quite know how to deal with what we were doing.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think if I told you that Arsenal would play half a season without Gabriel Jesus and Kai Havertz, pretty much, you probably would have bet on Gabriel Martinelli playing more minutes as a centre-forward than he has. I certainly would. I would have thought we would have seen this sooner.
That's the question I have for part two. So
right, okay.
Yeah,
we'll come back to that.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. Yeah,
but yeah, a really nice goal. You mentioned Odegaard popping up on the left. He does on this goal, really. Although Marino is outside, and the whole team's kind of slightly lopsided at that point. It's a beautiful, beautiful cross from Trossard. Perfectly weighted, and Martinelli with a nice flick, and so important, isn't it? The timings of goals. Suddenly, we've got a game again.
Yeah. Absolutely. And
then self-sabotage from Liverpool, of course, by bringing on Trent Alexander-Arnold.
I guess we should talk about it, seeing as you've just mentioned it. Not a lot about football these days, or, at this point in my life, maybe, shocks me. But I was really quite shocked by that response to Trent Alexander-Arnold from the Liverpool fans. Not just the fact that they booed him coming on, but they booed every touch he took, And I know it's not all of them or anything like that, but, a significant portion of that crowd booed their own player on a day when they should be celebrating winning the title. A title that he, by the way, has helped them win. Team effort, team collective, or whatever you want to say. The only time they didn't boo was when he had that chance from a free kick, which really sort of highlights the hypocrisy of it all, doesn't it? We'll boo you, but man, when you're about to perhaps score, you're all right again in our books, you know.
It's very odd, I think, this one.
Yeah, I really do. I was really, really surprised by it, to be honest. Really. I know that there's like, they're not happy that he's leaving, and I know that, you know, there's all these arguments as to why it's justified to boo a player who, I don't know, he's like an academy kid there. He's grown up there. He's won them, helped win 2 Premier League titles, a Champions League. I'm sure they've won some cups along the way with him. I can't remember exactly. They've reached however many Champions League finals. He's got more assists than any other defender in Premier League history. I think that's the stat. You know, he's been an incredible player for them. And at the end of his contract, he's seen out his contract. He's respected his contract. He's choosing to go to Real Madrid. He's not going to fucking Everton or to Manchester City or, you know, a team that's, you know, considered a local rival. I just found it really, really, really grotty from Liverpool, from that section of their fans. It was really surprising, I have to say.
I mean, to try and put it through an Arsenal prism, just to see how you feel it would be received in North London, I guess he's kind of their equivalent to Bukayo Saka, right?
Sure.
Players, you know, relatively local, come through the academy, an elite player, England international. Do you think if Bukayo, you know, were to run down his deal, I don't think there's much prospect of this happening. It's purely hypothetical. But if he were to do that and leave and go abroad, do you think he'd get a similar response at the Emirates Stadium? I
mean, if he's leaving at the end of a season when Arsenal have won the title, do you not think?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think there's always going to be some idiots out there who would take against him, simply by virtue of the fact he's leaving the club and therefore, you know, somehow he's disrespecting Arsenal. But, you know, if he leaves at the end of a season when Arsenal have won the Premier League title, having, you know, helped us win another Premier League title, having helped us win a Champions League along the way, scoring goals and making all these assists, you know, I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I do not believe, even if people were upset with his decision to go, that when he was playing for us in a game against a team, let's say we're playing Liverpool, let's say it's the situation's reversed and we've won the title and we're playing Liverpool, they're the team that ostensibly we've beaten to the title. The idea that the Emirates Stadium would boo Bukayo Saka seems just not possible to me. It just doesn't seem possible to me. Like, you can't rule it out, and maybe it's just an example of how modern football fandom is too highly informed by online narrative or whatever it might be. But really, who could begrudge him if he decided at, you know, whatever age he is, after winning loads of stuff for Arsenal, if he wanted to go abroad, it's a short career. I just don't see that happening. Or if people were booing, they'd be told to shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think I agree. I also sort of slightly chuckled to myself. Obviously, I remember all the uproar a couple of years ago about Granit Xhaka at Anfield and how that changed the atmosphere in the ground. And then have to watch the sort of slightly odd sight of Liverpool fans changing the atmosphere in the ground themselves of their own volition, by booing their academy player. Very, very weird. Very weird. And yeah,
I think, like, genuinely, I think it's terrible. I really do. And it's not to, you know, judge all Liverpool fans or anything like that, but it is really, really poor. I thought Arne Slot's interview on Sky Sports afterwards was really poor as well. You know, this idea, well,
what did he say?
He said booing isn't as loud as clapping, something like that. And this idea that, like, well, you know, so people are entitled to boo if they want, but, you know, I've got to pick the players. And I do wonder, genuinely, if you're a Liverpool player, what do you think of that? If you are one of those Liverpool players, And you see someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold, who has made 400 appearances and 100 assists and 40 goals or whatever it is, who's decided to leave, and the fans turn on him in a quite vicious way, because that must have been a difficult thing for him to go through, right? Because he's a local lad and has been a Liverpool fan, and all of a sudden he's persona non grata. I do wonder what some of the other players are thinking about that. And the manager, at a point in his career at Liverpool where his stock probably will never be higher, had the opportunity to say, look, we don't like that. People are entitled to express their opinions, but Trent has been, this, that, and the other for us. He didn't really back his player. And I do wonder what that might mean for other Liverpool players when they think about that manager, when they think about those fans, when they think about, going in for the 50-50, just a really, really grotty thing. I didn't like it at all.
Yeah. And just to sort of round that out, because I could imagine someone saying, well, Arsenal have booed players before. And of course, there have been significant incidents, Emmanuel Aboué, Granit Xhaka, two that spring to mind. What I would say is I didn't like that at the time either. Do you know what I mean? Like, I didn't think that was good either. So, and it's different circumstances, which is not to excuse it, but I thought they were pretty grotty instances too,
Sure. Listen, nobody's perfect, but we're only talking about a thing that happened yesterday. We don't have to sort of relitigate everything that happened in the past. I just think that context that we're talking about, if you put it in the through the prism of Bukayo Saka doing something like that after having the career that Trent Alexander-Arnold had at Liverpool, then I think it's a different kind of thing than a sort of instantaneous emotive response to something that sort of got people wound up, in
the course of a game.
Yeah, in the course of a game.
And it's happened on the field.
Exactly.
That is a different thing.
Yeah.
So that happened, and that was sort of mad and bizarre.
And then we scored.
We scored not too long after, yeah.
Yes, and it was Trent Alexander-Arnold who, I guess, much to the ire of some of those Liverpool fans, just played Mikel Merino onside. Martin Odegaard clearly got a delivery of vitamins this week, because the shooting power that was not present for most of this season is back. We saw the one against PSG, which produced that incredible save from Donnarumma, and then there was one yesterday, another really good save from Alisson, but Mikel Merino is there to head home and make it 2-2. And game on for a very short period of time, though.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder how different the narrative about Martin Odegaard might be if those two shots had flown into the net.
Yeah, I guess.
I actually think the keeper should do better there, I have to say. I don't think it's great goalkeeping, that.
Sort of comes off his wrist or something, doesn't it?
Yeah, I just feel like it's close to him, and I feel like he should be able to get that away from goal. But massive credit to Mikel Merino following in. He's got a real instinct for that.
He does. What about this stat? Did you see this earlier from Orbinho? So here it is. Mikel Merino has now scored as many Premier League goals for Arsenal as Jack Wilshere, Alexander Hleb, and Edu. 7.
Wow. I mean,
that seems mad, doesn't it?
Yeah, Hleb, I'm less surprised because that guy would not shoot.
Yeah.
It was the last thing he wanted to do. Wilshere is a bit of a surprise, and Edu as well. When Merino arrived, I thought Edu was sort of like my point of reference. I thought, here we go, upright, left-footed midfield player, quite sort of stylish in possession, quite physical. But yeah, he scored. How many goals is it now? He scored
9 goals so far this season, 7 in the Premier League.
7 in the Premier League. Okay, yeah, very decent return. Very decent return. A lot of those as a striker, of course.
Yeah, But like you say, good movement, good anticipation. When Odegaard took that shot, he immediately recognized the potential for a rebound. And, right place, right time, if you want to call it striker's instinct or whatever. But, I think you have to give him credit for that.
Definitely. I mean, his goals have been so important. And, part of the reason we haven't seen Martinelli through the middle has been the form of Merino in that position.
That's true. It didn't end well for Mikel, unfortunately. He was booked in the first half, and I think he can't really have any arguments about the booking that he received. And he was booked again in the second half, and I don't really think he can have any complaints about the yellow card he received, even if there's probably a discussion to be had about Liverpool getting an advantage, taking the shot, etc. But he did steam into a challenge. I have to say, I kind of have some sympathy for him. I don't think it was a smart challenge to make. When you're on a yellow card, you've got to win the ball or you're fucking toast. But I do have some sympathy for him in that I think he was physically goosed. Absolutely knackered. About 5 minutes before, he had the ball out on the right wing and just sort of kicked fresh air and fell over. And I think that is a clear sign that a player is absolutely knackered, completely and utterly fatigued. If he's falling over of his own volition, I know we didn't have a lot on the bench.
Well, this was going to be my question. You watched the second half in real time.
Yeah.
First sub was made just before the setting off, right? Calafiori and Tierney came on. But do you think that they came too late, those changes? It's hard to say because the second half, I mean, we recovered from a 2-goal deficit. You can't be too critical, can you? But
not really. I mean, it wasn't that, but I did look at Merino after he fell over that time. And then there was like a little period where the camera was sort of on him. They're sort of talking about, they were talking about the goals that he scored. And you can just see him, to show a replay of his incident, you can see him just... He looks absolutely knackered. He's walking across the pitch and the legs are heavy. Maybe we could have got Zinchenko on for him. I know it's not ideal, but those subs came, 78th minute, and the subs were Tierney and Calafiori on for Trossard and Ben White. Trossard, by the way, seemed to go down with an injury. It looked like a hamstring injury or a knee injury or something. So that was part of it. But, we put a couple of left backs on, as Mikel Arteta is wont to do. But then, beyond not making a change, I kind of feel as well David Raya needs to recognise that Merino's absolutely knackered, and don't give him a ball on the edge of the box, which I'm not saying he shouldn't be able to deal with it, but, sometimes you just need to be a bit more, you need to have a bit more common sense in terms of what you do.
Yeah, I think so. A similar one in Paris, wasn't there, where I think maybe from the free kick that Rice gave away, it was sort of a pass that put Declan in a slightly awkward position. He's been brilliant all season, Raya. Don't get me wrong. There's just been a few pass selections in the last couple of weeks that have been a bit questionable.
I think ordinarily, right? I think Raya has every right to expect players like Mikel Merino and Declan Rice to be able to deal with those passes. Genuinely. Right. But I think the Rice one is sort of more of a slight concentration issue on his part, where he just takes a heavy touch and it leads to the free kick. Yeah. If I'm the goalkeeper and I'm seeing my teammate there and he's absolutely blowing out his arse because, he's just fucking wrecked, I think I would avoid giving him a pass there. That's all I'm saying. It's not to excuse Merino, but I do think when that run of play or passage of play is analysed, that might be something they discuss.
I think that's fair. I think equally for balance, I think Mikel Arteta probably, on some level, admires Raya's dogged adherence to the plan in whatever circumstances. You know, certainly I know what Aaron Ramsdale would have done in that situation. You know, booted the ball up the other end of the pitch and it could have come straight back to us. So,
and of course, you don't get the well, you know, by kicking it long, he avoided Mikel Merino getting a red card because, you know, that doesn't happen. You know, that scenario doesn't present itself in front of you. So you don't know the benefits of kicking it long, whereas there might be criticism of not, as you say, sticking to the plan.
Yeah, exactly. I think Raya's willingness to always play the possession pass, to always play the short pass, keep the ball in the ground, keep it circulating, is a big part of why Arteta loves him as much as he does. Funnily enough, by the way, when I was watching this one back, the Merino, I'd not seen it live, and I was showing the replays, and they kind of show you the first challenge he makes, and I was like, oh, he's a bit unlucky there. And then they show that he makes a second challenge as well, for good measure. And I was like, oh yeah, no, fair enough.
Yeah, I actually think as well, in mitigation to Merino, he does miscontrol the ball, but there's also a little bit of a foul on him by Jota, sort of a push on him while he's off balance.
Right, that sends him into, yeah.
So it's one of those where
the second challenge is a bit desperate.
It 100% is. That's why I said you have to get the ball there. If you don't get the ball, you're taking all the man and you're going to get yourself sent off, you know?
Yeah. Another thing Arteta wasn't happy about, right? Going down to 10 men again.
No.
But I think you're right to say, I don't know. It's understandable what happened to Merino, I think. It's not the case of a reckless decision by a player or... You know what I mean? Like, he's not been an idiot. He's not elbowed someone in the face for no reason.
Sure, yeah.
He's a tired player who's taken a bad touch.
Mm-hmm.
I get it.
So Liverpool had some chances. There was a shot wide. There was the Alexander-Arnold free kick that we mentioned. Jota had a chance as well. There was a big chance for Andy Robertson right at the back post. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah, he was involved in everything, Robertson.
He was, yeah.
I mean, again, one of those that looks really straightforward, probably not entirely, but it's a big chance. And
yeah,
I felt in those moments, even when I was watching the Gambacon review, really, that, you know, especially with us having 10 men, they were the likeliest. But there was a but, right?
There was a but, yeah. Martin Odegaard, you know, had the ball in the opposition half, went running and took a shot which went just wide. Maybe
right
Alisson.
Decision.
Yeah. Have a go. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not? I know there's this sort of, right, just keep the ball and take the point.
He's got Zinchenko coming up on his outside. But what I would say is, it's only Zinchenko. Like, if it was Martinelli or Saka, or I genuinely think that would make a difference. But he's got a relatively clear shot from 20 yards, Odegaard. I think he's within his rights to take it.
Let me just have a look at it again. I'm just watching because I hadn't really noticed the Zinchenko aspect of it.
He makes a good supporting run, and you know, Martinelli makes the diagonal. Zinchenko's come in. There is a moment where he can play it to him.
Let me have a look. Yeah, I'm watching.
I think he's within his rights.
Yeah, I can see that. I can understand why Zinchenko is.
There's definitely going to be a freeze frame somewhere on Twitter of someone being like, "This is the pass." You know what I mean? But
Yeah. I can understand why Zinchenko would be a little aggrieved. For me, though, if there's been criticism of Odegaard this season, it's that he hasn't been willing to shoot. You know, he's a shoot. What was it? What game was it a couple of weeks ago? Remember when there was people going mad because he took a touch and whatever game that was, and everyone's going, why doesn't he shoot? And I think, you know, if you're Martin Odegaard, you've had a good second half, and I think he did have a good second half in this game. I think it was really, really important for Arsenal in our second half performance and the way that we got ourselves back into it. If you're feeling your oats again a little bit, why not have a go from the edge of the box? And it wasn't far away. Then Liverpool go up the other end. They get a corner. The ball's in the back of the net. The flag was up. I think he was offside anyway, Robertson, when he scores, but it's pulled back for what was a fairly obvious foul by Konate on Miles Lewis-Skelly. Sort of grabs him in the face. I'm not sure why that isn't at least a booking, to be honest. But maybe that's not the thing we need to worry about at this point of the season, you know?
No. Good save by Raya in there for sure.
Yeah.
Rightly disallowed that goal. I mean, I think there's two potential offences there, like you say. Just having a look down the line, I think Robertson is offside. I think you're right. I think Kieran Tierney's just gets out enough. And that's like I say, I think it's quite a big moment in sort of determining the tone of the conversation around the team at this point in time. And also it's a big point in our league standings. Really, it helps us towards second place. No, I think by the time we kicked off, enough results had gone in our favour that I don't think our place in the Champions League was really under quite as much threat as maybe some people might lead you to believe. But I certainly this really helps.
Yeah, for sure. I was pleased at the final whistle. I felt like we deserved what we got from this game. Maybe we rode our luck a little bit here and there, but I think that second half effort was sufficient for me to get something from the game. I was glad to see it, for these players. I know they've put a lot of effort in. I know we all have our issues with some of the flaws that we have, but I come back to the idea that I think these are a group of players who do care and they want to do well for Arsenal, and there's nobody who goes through the motions or nobody hides. So to put that first 45 minutes behind us and to respond and show some character and come back, I found pretty pleasing, and to go unbeaten against Liverpool this season, maybe it puts something in their minds. There is the sort of ongoing record against the, I have to say, so-called Big Six, because two of those Big Six are fucking basically propping up the Premier League table in Manchester United and Tottenham. Christ, what a fucking season it would have been if they'd been both relegated. Anyway, that record we have against what is considered the Big Six, even if it's not necessarily reflective of the Premier League table this season. But I don't think my feelings were shared by Mikel Arteta, who afterwards was really, really, really unhappy. Did you watch the press conference?
Yeah.
Did you see the full interview on Sky Sports?
I'm not sure if I've seen the Sky one. I've seen the Match of the Day one.
I haven't seen the Match of the Day one. The one on Sky Sports.
That's probably the first one he did, I would imagine. Probably so.
Can
you tell?
Yeah, I mean, his head was fucking spinning. It really was. It's, I think it's been a very, very emotional week. And I think Mikel Arteta is deeply hurt by the fact that we went out of the Champions League. And I get that. Like him and the players, I want them to be hurt because, the motivation that can give you going forward. I was a little bit surprised how strong he was, to be honest. I felt like after the week we've had, the message might be a bit more supportive of the comeback versus the first half. Mm-hmm. That was just what I was thinking. But do you have any issue with, what he said and how he said it, which was basically, that's not acceptable. I don't like a reaction. I want action. That was the sort of the buzzword or the buzz phrase of his post-match interviews, whether it was on Sky, whether it was in the press conference. He was not accepting of that first half at all, and very publicly made his players aware of that, which, I have no doubt they were aware of 2 minutes into the halftime break.
I've got no issue with it at all. I think he's within his rights, and I don't think he was. It's not like he questioned the integrity or the character of his players. It's not like he sort of threw the team under the bus. He was just very clear that fell below the standards that he expects.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's fair enough. I think he was right. Like I say, I didn't the manner in which we conceded those goals, I didn't really recognise that from a Mikel Arteta team.
Mm-hmm.
So, I understood why he felt the way he did. And I'm sure we've all had times in our life where we feel like that, where you're annoyed about something and then something happens to kind of ameliorate or, make the situation better, but you're still so pissed off.
Yeah.
That you almost can't acknowledge it. You know what I mean?
There's a brilliant video of Harry Redknapp being hit in the head with a football. Do you remember that one? Do you remember it?
Of all the things you were going to say, I was like, what's this? It's going to be some insight into like management technique or sports psychology. It's Harry Redknapp being hit in there with a football. I don't know if I do. Shall I watch it now?
Basically, Harry Redknapp is doing an interview at the training ground.
Oh, yes, I do remember it. You're right.
Someone kicks a football and it whacks him in the head. And he turns around and he's like, who did that? Fucking... And then he sort of gets back on with the interview for a bit, and they're asking him a question. You can see him like twitching away, and you can see he can't get it out of his head. And they ask him a question and he sort of doesn't say anything. He's like, fucking, no wonder he's in the fucking reserves. And I feel like that first half was
Mikel Arteta being hit in the head with a football.
Mikel Arteta being hit in the head with a football. And despite the fact that his players responded in the way that he would have wanted and asked them to do, he couldn't shake it,
That's fair enough, I think. Something we all have to bear in mind whenever we're looking at interviews or press conferences after games is that it's a very emotionally febrile context. Very emotionally charged a lot of the time. And, I think this is one such case. But no, I've no issue with it. Was there any issue? Like, did anyone have an issue with it? Was there any?
I don't know. I mean,
pushback.
Most of the reaction I've seen to it is people saying fair play.
Yeah.
If these are the fucking standards, then you've got to maintain them. And we know what he's like about standards. And when people fall below that, most of the time he will do that privately. And look, to be fair, as he always does, he says himself that he takes responsibility for it, because ultimately it is his job. What I did think, though, just to be serious for a moment, is that in the Sky interview, he was maybe the least coherent that I think I've ever seen him. It felt like a whole load of non sequiturs or whatever it was. It didn't really make a great deal of sense. The questions he was being asked and the responses he were giving didn't really match up, And I felt like obviously he is emotionally drained from what's happened. And I don't think it's just going out against PSG. I think it is literally the weight of everything that has happened this season from almost the first game. There's been so much to deal with, so much to contend with, so many problems, some of them of our own making, some of them outside of our control. The pressure that exists at a club like Arsenal, having come so close. I really, really feel like he and the players at this point, but I looked at that interview on Sky Sports and thought, this man needs fucking a holiday. He needs a week off. Genuinely.
Get this boy out to San Sebastian for a bit.
Exactly. He really, really needs a break. I feel like just the weight of it all was evident in that interview with Sky, where normally, even if he's angry or if he's emotional, he's a very coherent speaker. He gets his messages across very well. This felt a bit like, like his head was spinning. And that's not a good place to be. I think we can all understand why he might be there, but yeah, he needs a break. He needs this season to be over. We need to just go and batter Newcastle on Sunday and secure second place in Champions League, and then
you and I can play at Southampton.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think so. I think that's absolutely right. He looks like a man in need of a break, and there is one not too far around the corner. Not too far. Obviously, one more home game this season and then the away game against Southampton to finish it off. But the point yesterday against Liverpool does put us in a decent position going into that final home game, where I think as well, we had a question about this actually. Before we go into more questions in part two, let me see if I can find it. Basically, somebody asked whether it was on Blue Sky or whether it was on Discord. I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I'll try and find it at the break and give credit to the question. But maybe that message that he gave after the game yesterday was as well a bit about what kind of response he wants to see against Newcastle. Yeah, I think he's often thinking about, in his press conferences, how does this play among my players or the opposition, and I'm sure that will have been in his mind. That's a big game, Newcastle, really big game. They're on a decent run, aren't they? And they're third now, actually. So they could go above us with a win at the Emirates Stadium, which we don't want to see. It comes, by the way, that question was from mevanstiller.bsky.social, so thank you for that. Yeah, I'm sure that's in his thinking. Okay, well, look, we will take a little bit of a break here and we'll come back with your questions and more in part two right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part two of the show where we answer the questions that you send to us on Blue Sky at gunnerblog.bsky.social and at arseblog.com. Also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. Just a quick note about our event at Union Chapel this weekend. We are still very much looking forward to seeing many of you there. If you do have tickets and you can't go, please put them back on sale at face value on the Discord or on Patreon. I've put a post on the Patreon. You can leave your contact details there and swap details with other people who wanna buy those tickets. Life and work and stuff gets in the way. The best laid plans of mice and men, James. Not everyone can go. So if you do have tickets, mice actually don't need tickets. No, free entry for mice. Yeah. Bring as many mice as you like, but men do require tickets. Yes. So yeah, just check on the Discord or check on Patreon. There's a post there, and you can find a way to find those tickets a new home, shall we say? Lovely. All right. I did say I had questions about Martinelli, didn't I? Yeah. A couple from the Discord. Raddy999. Morning, chaps. Felt that Martinelli showed some nearly moments through the middle in this game and scored a decent centre-forward goal. Not much point in looking backwards now, but do you think it's worth recognising that he might have been a decent alternative option to Merino up top in recent times, albeit he's had his own injury troubles too? And Tola says, morning gents, do you think we might have missed a trick not playing Martinelli at centre-forward more often during this run-in? Although the Merino experiment ended up being relatively positive, I think the second half versus Liverpool showed us how much more potent we would be with a pacey and agile centre-forward. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because Merino has done so well, by and large, that it's difficult to have too many complaints about that as our kind of plan B in this situation. Martinelli, I think file alongside Zinchenko in midfield or something that Mikel Arteta has seemed incredibly reticent to do, and the slim nature of the squad this season and the injuries we've sustained have kind of forced his hand. It'll be interesting to see if it remains part of his hand moving forward. Well, he might have no choice. Martinelli in that role? Sorry, I thought he was good.
Obviously scored a goal, and he gives you something a little bit different there. I have been a little bit surprised that over the years we haven't seen it more often, even now and again. In certain games. But yeah, I think you're right to put it in that bracket with Zinchenko in midfield as something that Arteta just does not seem willing to do, or does not, view Martinelli's qualities as cohesive or whatever you might say in terms of how he wants his team to play. There might be no choice for Sunday though.
Nope.
Because Marino is suspended, obviously, after the red card. Trossard, if he's got a hamstring injury, seems unlikely that he'll be there. Well, obviously,
did we talk about Declan Rice much?
No, we didn't. We mentioned that he wasn't in the team, and there's reporting this afternoon that he's got a hamstring injury that's not thought to be serious, so it remains to be seen whether or not he can play against Newcastle. But, he couldn't play. He wasn't in the squad even for the trip to Liverpool. Jurriën Timber as well. I mean, I think Arteta basically said as well afterwards there was some players playing who, were probably physically at the end of their tether. Maybe Marino was one of those, by the way, based on what we were talking about. So it might be a case that Martinelli is the option for centre forward.
Very possibly. I think there's every chance that that's what we'll see. And I'm quite excited by that, to be honest. I don't know if he is an Arteta. Well, I don't know, these days we play with Marino, we play with Havertz, we're linked with Sesko and Gyökeres, but got to remember Arteta is also the guy who bought Gabriel Jesus and who thought that he was the answer at centre forward. And, there are qualities that Martinelli has, I think, that are similar to Jesus in some capacities. His ability to carry the ball, his willingness to drop in, the pace that he can offer, the running in behind, the pressing ability, of course, defending from the front. So, yeah, I'm excited to see how he gets on there. And I don't know what's going to happen with Martinelli and Trossard moving forward. I know there were stories. There was a story last week of Trossard being in contract talks with Arsenal. But I do feel like Martinelli and Trossard, if Arsenal significantly add to their front line this summer, then I think there's an argument that Martinelli and Trossard are kind of occupying a pretty similar space in the squad, where they're, these wide left players who can also play through the middle. I do wonder if we might find a scenario where it's kind of one or the other. Yeah,
maybe so. What do you make of the Trossard extension talks, by the way? I mean, there was talk about like a contract till 2029 or 2028 or something like that.
I'm surprised, I have to say.
Seems a bit odd for a player of his age.
He's 30, isn't he?
Yeah.
31 at the end of this year. Yeah, I'd be a bit surprised if Arsenal did that deal. That's just purely my sort of analysis from the outside rather than something led by information.
Sure.
It just feels like the time may be opportune to maybe sell Leandro Trossard. A player I really like, by the way, and I think that's a brilliant assist from Martinelli yesterday. I know that he's a guy who can be frustrating at times, but I think he's so productive and can be such a threat and so versatile as well. But I just think it might be the right moment to replace him with somebody younger with more capacity to improve over the next few years, when you'd have to say, as an attacker at 30, is that going to be the case for Trossard?
For sure. I think if, and I know this is just a hypothetical, but I think if there is an either-or situation with Martinelli or Trossard, I'd be inclined to keep Martinelli. And it's not that I'm sort of saying Martinelli should be starting every game. I think there is a need maybe to do something different on the left-hand side. But as a squad player who can play left, who can play right, and who I think is capable of playing down the middle if we need him to, Martinelli would be the guy that I would hang on to.
Yeah, I've seen a few people say they want Martinelli to take the Trossard role in the squad, and I know exactly what they mean by that.
Sure. Just sort of following on from that, if we think about the game against Newcastle on Sunday, I know we're a way away. We don't necessarily need to go into it in too much detail. if there's no Rice, if there's no Trossard, if there's no Marino, and Martinelli has to play, let's say, in the middle, does it open the door for Ethan Nwaneri, who once again didn't get on the pitch yesterday? And ATX Bergkamp Lover 69 420 says, another game, another day we don't see Nwaneri. Is there something Mikel knows that we don't?
He was asked about it, Mikel, wasn't he? I think pre-game. I think I'm right in saying, I'm sure I saw. Here you go. Ethan Nwaneri's game time can change very quickly, says Mikel Arteta, May 9th. There are moments where players are used more and less. He's played a lot, probably more than anybody expected. In the last few games, it's been because of the games and the context. We decided not to play him in those matches. It can change very quickly. I mean, that was quite prescient, I suppose, because it has changed. And suddenly he's in very strong contention for a game against Newcastle. We've spoken on here before in recent weeks about my slight sort of surprise at his reduced role. And that remains the case. I suppose I just sort of have to put my faith in the people making these decisions. They are seeing him every day. They will know if his fitness or his form has just dropped off a bit, if he needs taking out the firing line. Ultimately, I guess we've got to trust their judgment on that.
Yeah, I've been a bit surprised myself. I wasn't necessarily surprised yesterday. I think we talked about Nwaneri after the PSG game, or maybe I talked to Andrew about it, because I felt like he should have come on in that game because we needed goals and we needed to basically throw the kitchen sink at the game. And I was very surprised that he didn't get even 10, 15 minutes at the end of that game to try and score a goal, because, you know, he's one of our leading scorers this season, which, you know, it's not a big long list of guys scoring lots of goals. So I felt a bit strange that he didn't get that opportunity. Yesterday, what he'd done was obviously put Tierney on the left wing for Trossard and brought Calafiori on at right back for Ben White, because Timber wasn't fit enough to get off the bench. Yeah. And then a minute later, Mikel Marino was sent off. So the change he made then was to put Bukayo Saka over on the left, and then he brought Zinchenko on for Bukayo Saka, which I think makes a bit more sense than Nwaneri in the context of playing out 10, 15 minutes at Anfield with 10 men.
Sure.
To me, yesterday made a bit more sense than the one against PSG. But generally, I think it is a bit odd that he hasn't been more involved over the last few weeks. You know, there were games, I think perhaps, was it the Bournemouth game between the two PSG games where maybe he could have started and Saka started? You know, moments, just decisions like that do make me wonder a little bit about, you know, what exactly is going on there. But like you say, we don't have the full information. But if Lewis Skelly...
I mean, there's a contract to be negotiated.
Well, so. That's actually something Andrew mentioned to me this morning. Andrew Allen we were just chatting about it and just wondering, is there something going on behind the scenes with the contract? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I think if you'd offered Ethan 25 Premier League appearances at the start of the season, 10 of which were starts, I think he and the people around him would have been really happy with that.
Sure, but it's context, isn't it? You know,
it is context, and I think at a time when you're entering, or not entering, but sort of, you know, looking to step those contract talks up, it is curious that he's featuring less and less. And I do think that he is a talent of such significance that I think he'll be a man in a hurry. I know patience is part of being an academy player. He probably as well. He must be aware. It must do something to him that Lewis Skelly's playing game after game after game after game after game. Do you know what I mean? It would not be human if it didn't. For all his rational understanding of, we're playing in different positions, there's different needs of the team, competing with different players.
Yeah,
he will be looking at that and thinking, I need my time. So, I mean, there's 2 games remaining in this Premier League season. I think arguably there's no reason. I think he probably will start on Sunday. And if Sunday goes well, there's no reason he can't start the following one. So, so we might see plenty of him yet. But it's an interesting little situation to keep an eye on, for sure.
Yeah, I guess it just shows you that, when young players break through, because one player does X, it doesn't mean that another player is going to do X. The trajectories are often different, and the speed at which they break through can be different. But I think you're right. The Lewis Skelly thing will probably be, he'll obviously be delighted for him, for his mate, but at the same time, he'll be desperate to play as well,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if anything, it'll make him more desperate to play.
Sure, yeah.
What about this from Greg Just Ham? And Greg says, Kiwior has been great as an individual on many levels, but have you noticed Saliba has been less imperious in Gabriel's absence? I rarely agree with Jamie Carragher, but he made the point that Gabriel's leadership is missed and Saliba is a lesser player or more error-prone without his partner. Again, it's not to say Kiwior has been bad, he's exceeded expectations, but can Saliba improve in his on-field leadership in order to become truly elite?
Yes, I think he can. I think you also have to remember that 24 is still pretty young in the life of a central defender. I think it's unquestionably true that without Gabriel, he has looked slightly less assured at times. Mm-hmm. But then when we talk about central defenders, the importance of partnerships is paramount. It really is. I think it's true if you had Ferdinand and Vidic and then you throw in, take one of those out and stick somebody else in, whether it's fucking who did they have? Like Johnny Evans. They still have Johnny Evans. Fucking hell. But, like a Wes Brown or one of those guys, that the same would have been true of Ferdinand or Vidic, whereas together they were a very, 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 very good partnership. But one without the other wasn't quite as good. And I think that's true of Saliba. And I think it's also probably going to be true of Gabriel, that if Saliba had got injured and Gabriel was playing alongside, whether it's Timber or White or whoever it is, he might not have had quite the assurance. So I think the importance of that partnership can't be understated. The other thing I would say is that we have to recognise that William Saliba has played 400 minutes more than any other outfield player at Arsenal this season. David Raya has the most minutes, but it is slightly different from a goalkeeper's perspective, and Saliba has been essentially ever present. I know he had a suspension, didn't he? And maybe one game off with injury, but he's played 4,421 minutes across all competitions for Arsenal this season. Next best is Declan Rice on 3,948, So I think you probably, if you're going to discuss, and we have discussed players being fatigued mentally and physically, although it doesn't appear to be as evident with Saliba as it might with some others because of the style with which he plays, I think you're seeing elements of that creep into his game. There was a moment yesterday where Liverpool played a ball down their sort of inside left channel and Saliba was there ahead of whoever, I think it was Luis Diaz. 99 times out of 100, he takes that ball, he either plays a pass back to David Raya or he protects it and he turns and he makes a pass. Like, you don't get near him in those situations.
Yeah.
And he just sort of stumbled and Liverpool got possession. I don't think much came of it. But we've seen a few of those of late from Saliba. And I don't think that all of a sudden he's forgotten how to play football or that his technical level has fallen. I think he's just fucking knackered because he's played more than anybody else. And we've got 2 games to go this season. And I think if we're going to discuss Saliba, you can say, yes, he's not as good without Gabriel, but still absolutely brilliant, really. You couldn't ask for more from a central defender. I think a bit of understanding about how much he has played is really important if we're going to have this conversation.
So you think File with Mikel Arteta under needs a break?
Yeah, 100%.
I agree.
100%. Okay, let me see. A couple of questions about Andrea Berta. Simon King says, how much influence can an experienced footballs man like Berta have on how Arteta runs and manages his squad? And Arsenal Rule, also on the Discord, says, are you worried that Berta might buy players that Arteta doesn't want? Arteta is so stubborn, I could see him not playing Gyökeres as he wanted Sesko, for example.
I'll start with the second question. So I don't think that would happen. I don't think that Arsenal would make an investment worth, tens of millions of pounds in a situation where the coach was simply not going to play a player that the sporting director signed. I think that part of the reason Andrea Berta has been hired is because the club believe that he can work in conjunction with Mikel Arteta, that they have an understanding or a good relationship, or at least an open dialogue. So I don't foresee a situation where, a player is foisted on Arteta that he's actively against. Can you see that?
No. I mean, that wouldn't make any sense anyway, would it? It would just be a bad way to run things. I think there might be occasions where Mikel Arteta will have to compromise on a player he wants versus a player he really, really wants, you know? Like there might be a player he really, really wants that we can't get, so we've got to get somebody else, so you got to get the best of the rest. But it won't be a case that, like, if Arteta says, no, I do not want this player, it would be just fucking crazy to go and do that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't see that happening.
Yeah, it's completely illogical.
I think Arteta's got too much sway and too much say in these matters as well. In terms of how much he can help Mikel manage the squad, I don't know. I don't really know to what degree that falls within his remit. I don't think he's he's the sporting director, but I don't think he's a particularly technically minded person. This is a guy with a business background, principally. He is there primarily to do deals, it seems to me. Now, he can certainly help Mikel Arteta manage the squad by supplying him with depth and players that he needs, but I don't think he's going to be sitting down and looking at the periodization and seeing who's in the red zone and advising the performance department on who should play when. Sure,
well, but what about this? So this is a question from the Real Arsenal Deal, who's the Real Arsenal Deal.bsky.social. And he said, not on the game itself, but curious to hear what you both made of Mikel Arteta's pre-match comments about knowing our squad was super short at the start of the season. Is that an area, let's say, where Berta could say, well, you don't have enough depth there. We're overstocked with, I don't know, left backs, but maybe we need, I don't know, a striker. Is there a way that he could have influence over that? Or is that something that the manager, his coaching staff, the recruitment staff, the football operations staff will sit down and look at? Remember, was it in the Amazon one where Edu had a whiteboard, didn't he?
Yeah, with the depth chart.
With the depth chart.
Laid out by position. Yeah, that is Andrea Berta's job. That is Andrea Berta's job. Sorry, my son's just going da 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 in the background. That is Andrea Berta's job, and in theory, he should be laying out that strategy. But obviously, that will have to be complemented by what Mikel Arteta wants and demands. So, it's all new. So we don't really know what sort of clout, what sort of sway, what sort of independence Andrea Berta has as yet. We'll be in a much better position to judge that after the window. And I think that's what makes this summer quite interesting, potentially. I'm really curious to see how it plays out. And you're right to talk about compromise, because the no compromise centre forward solution is Alexander Isak, right? That's what Mikel Arteta would want above all others. But increasingly, it seems that's not going to be.
That's not happening. Come on.
Yeah.
I think everybody needs to consign that idea to the dustbin of hope.
Well, indeed, and probably you could probably include the manager in that, you know. And so at that point, you are compromising. So where do you want to go with it? I had a question here about a different part of the pitch and transfers, which was from Martinelli the Elephant. And they said, gents, a lot of talk around Juan Garcia last summer focused on the large transfer fee for a second choice keeper. The same is happening again now those rumours have resurfaced ahead of the summer. But what if he hasn't been earmarked as just a backup? I love Raya, but a couple of recent wobbles... I love Raya, and bar a couple of recent wobbles, he's been outstanding since joining Arsenal. However, Arteta has previous with being ruthless in the goalkeeper position, and the potential outlay is more in line with what you'd pay for a first 11 starter.
I mean, I think that's right, that transfer fee is not what you would pay for a backup goalkeeper.
Yeah.
Then it's a question of, are you looking for a backup goalkeeper, or are you looking for a player who's maybe part of a succession plan, as he's intimating there? Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's a lot of money now for a player, but maybe in 4, 5, 6, 7 years' time, you're looking at that outlay on a young goalkeeper as money very well spent. You know, have you got a lot of value for money from that signing? I think that we need a backup goalkeeper of some kind this summer, right? Are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay, sorry.
I'm just listening and thinking.
Okay. We definitely need a backup goalkeeper of some description. I think we need one who can play in the Cups. I don't think Neto was able to play in the Cups this season and, really only played a bit part. He is like a stopgap guy who hasn't really been used at all because Mikel Arteta does not want to use him. Do you have to give yourself a bit of a safety net in that position? Because there is the Elliott Smith school of thought about backup goalkeepers, isn't there? Like, nobody gives a shit.
Buy a fridge
And stick it in there, which is fine until David Raya gets injured, and then you've got a fridge. And not only are you in big trouble then, you're in big trouble then. So I think you do need a backup goalkeeper of reasonable quality. Like, I was talking to Lewis about this on the preview podcast last week. He made the point about Liverpool this season when Alisson was injured, and he had quite a few injuries this season. They had Queeveen Kelleher, who, is not as good as Alisson, but is still a very good goalkeeper and has played a part in Liverpool winning the title. Whereas I think if we were in a position where, with all due respect to Neto, we had to play him for a prolonged period this season, it would have been maybe worse. Certain results could have been worse, So I think what bothers people mostly about this is the idea that if we spend £25 million or 25 million euros on a backup goalkeeper, it is going to have an impact on what we can spend elsewhere, which I think is not unreasonable. But do you think there's any feasible scenario in which Arsenal will say, right, we will do a deal for a goalkeeper, which will then impact our ability to bring in that forward and that striker that they're clearly desperate to bring in, and Mikel Arteta is clearly desperate to bring in? Like, if it's an either or, going back to that kind of scenario where, well, you can sign Juan Garcia, but you can't buy the top level striker, then by all means, let's get the pitchforks out. But I just can't imagine that we would do that to ourselves.
I don't think that will happen.
Yeah.
Is it possible that it could cost you or prevent you signing another attacker or a creative midfield player? Maybe. Listen. We all sort of wondered what might happen when David Raya was signed and how that would all play out. And you'd think, based on that we'd think, if Garcia comes in, he, won't be too long until he's playing. Famous last words. I don't think that's the case this time, but I really do think Raya is established at this point in time, and after the season he's had, it would be very odd to sort of be making moves to replace him. But, I could be wrong again.
Yeah. Maybe we underestimate Arsenal's ability to do the things that we don't want them to do. I don't know. I
think with Ramsdale, there was a sort of, the ruthlessness was grounded in I think, some fair criticisms. I think with Raya, that would feel like change for change's sake, I have to say. It really would. Yeah. There were people who felt that about the first change, but at the time, but I think this time it would be even more the case.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see. It does look like he's a guy that Arsenal want. I mean, we spend more on goalkeepers than we do on forwards, which is kind of crazy. But maybe come the end of August, that balance has been tipped significantly the other way, even if we do sign Joan Garcia. I hope that is the case, obviously. I did have a question here that I wanted to get into, but I think it needs greater discussion than we have time for right now. Okay. But it's about... it comes from Wise Marklar, and it's about the memification of football and why Arteta regularly plays into the hands of reporters with emotional answers. We were chatting about this ourselves last week a bit. I do think it is an interesting question, but maybe we'll get around to it next week.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. We've got a whole summer, Andrew.
Well, exactly. We have a whole summer. By the way, what did you make of the Liverpool banner presenting Mikel Arteta in a dress?
Yeah.
That was really weird, wasn't it?
It is weird. It's you've won the league. Do you know what I mean? I don't know why you need to take pot shots at others.
No, I get a bit of it, but literally grown men sat down and thought, what if we put Mikel Arteta in a dress and make a banner out of it? We'll get someone to fucking manufacture this, and then we'll show it at the ground. We'll stand there, look upon our work.
That's what I mean. It's just I think it's weird. An odd thing to do. But then they were booing their academy player. So, yeah, it's a different mentality, Andrew.
It is. All right. Well, look,
psyche. I daren't try to understand it.
No. Fair enough. It's beyond anything that we have time for right now, that is for sure. So look, we better go and get this podcast out to everybody. It is a bit later than usual, so thank you for your patience and thank you for sticking with us, and thank you as always for being here. Hope you enjoyed the show. We will have more for you in midweek. For now though, take it easy and we will catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.